Let's talk budget Cerakote setup. If you just enjoy learning new skills or messing around with creative outlets, this is a road to go down. If you have a handful of projects that you're interested in doing, this could also be a road to go down, but there is cost even to set up, obviously, a budget Cerakote setup. There's a number of pieces. We'll be talking about 4 of them specifically. And that's going to be your compressor setup, your spray booth, your sandblasting cabinet, and then of course here, what we're looking at, my home-built Cerakote oven. So those 4 pieces are going to cost some, but again, if you've got several projects that you're looking to do, you can come out ahead. And like I said, especially if you're interested in learning new skills all the time, this is just a fun thing to do. So first, we're going to talk in detail about what we need from a oven perspective. So this is the inside of my oven. I built it based on a how-to from a guy online. I will put the link to that how-to in the description. I followed it pretty much to a T. It's basically high heat insulation, which is a foil that you face inside towards the oven as a reflective barrier, and then it's also an insulative material. And then you use high heat foil tape to seal all the seams of whatever you're building this in. He says seal every crack. He's serious. If you don't, you will have heat leaks. You won't be able to keep a nice temperature, so really seal everything up. I just built it out of an old filing cabinet type thing. I liked the swinging open doors. So I just looked on Craigslist for a good while until I found one that fit my needs, metal obviously, and then I built the oven inside here. I know a lot of guys also will use drywall sheet to run along the insides. That also has a fire and heat rating associated to it, so you can do that. You could do both if you really wanted to keep things insulated well. I chose the foil because I lost less interior dimension. So mine is about 22 tall, 22 wide, and about 15 inches deep. I wanted that so I could put these rods across. So there's one rod up here that you have full height to hang, and then in the back you've got a tall rod and a rod at the half. This will actually allow me to hang multiple projects at the same time if I'm doing similar colors and whatnot. It actually fits quite a decent amount. You'll see that I have 2 barbecue heaters or starters. I cut holes using a Dremel on the side, and that allowed me to fit it through. I took this little bracket off first to allow me to fit things through easy. One of them is just it just plugs in. I thought that for this size enclosure, based on the instructions of building this oven, that I might need 2 barbecue starters. It turns out that nope, 1 is perfectly enough to keep this thing rolling, because we don't actually get that hot. We only get like 150 to 180 for some operations, 250 for some operations, and then the highest end for gassing out of metal is only 300. So you really don't have to get it that hot. So one of them, even for something this size, does seem to work. So that one just sits. But the one that does heat up, as per the instructional, is attached to this PID controller. In the instructions, he tells you everything you need from the internal wiring and what to buy, and it's super easy to follow. Setting up this PID for like what temperatures you want, all that sort of stuff, that was a little confusing. The manual is not too helpful. But there are a lot of instructionals online for these Inkbird PIDs. They all work similarly. So basically what you're looking to do is you're going to have to set a temperature offset. Mine was not accurate when I first got it, so I actually always keep a secondary measure. And so whatever this one says is what I trust, because I know it's accurate. And then this I put an offset on. And then the other thing that's really important is setting how how aggressively it responds to overages and underages. So basically you're going to set an upper threshold, a lower threshold, and it's going to try and stay in between there, and it's going to tell that thing to turn on and off based on that. Also, it comes with this little dinky thermometer that hooks up to it. That's how the PID tells the temperature. I originally had it coming through that hole in the back. The material was basically so thick that by the time it got in, it was almost covering the temperature gauge, and so I got really inaccurate temperatures. So I actually just decided, screw that. I just hung it here, and then I put my my secondary measure through that hole. If I were to do this again, I would probably get a PID that comes with a really long temperature probe, and therefore I could put it through that back hole and it would stick out. The last thing I want to note about the oven setup is that even when you close the doors, there is a slight gap in between. So I just created this thing that I sandwich in between the doors whenever I close it, and that helps me keep the temp. Here we have my budget spray booth. So it is essentially just a big box that I cut open and fanned out the front of so that it kind of funnels any paint or fumes into the box. And then I can hang stuff off the side of that, so you can see I've just clamped on my test swatches not swatches, but just so where I can spray some colors and see how it's fanning out and all that sort of fun. And then what it is inside the box is I just have an air filter, and that air filter captures the overspray that is being pulled in by a box fan that I just kind of wired into a hole I cut in the back of the box. And what this allows me to do is when I want to do Cerakote work, I just open a window in my workshop, I clamp that box fan into the window, and that becomes my exhaust for my spraying. It actually works surprisingly well, and it was super budget. Let's talk about the equipment that we spray with in that spray booth. So just the cheap little spray gun metal cup one, the 4-ounce metal cup one, because we are using stuff that will mess with some plastics. From Harbor Freight, they're really cheap. So if you screw one up or you run a metallic through it and you can't get it all out, just toss it. Regulator here, quick connect line, does the job beautifully. The other things that we're going to need for the spraying step is we are going to need some paint strainers. When you buy these, be careful. They're often sold in micron, and Cerakote's recommendations are in mesh. These are not equivalent measures. So the 150 micron is actually 100 mesh. And then oddly enough, the 150 mesh is close to 100 micron. So keep that in mind. You use the one of those for metallics and one of those for solid colors. So you do need both if you're planning on doing both of those styles. You will need a scale. I got the one that goes to 2 decimal places. This is what allows you to really accurately measure your Cerakote and hardener ratios. It's way easier than what I did at the beginning, where I tried to use these graduated cylinders to eyeball the amounts by volume. It also frees you up to mixing exactly what you need. When you try and eyeball, it's not as exacting, so you end up making it in like 18 milliliter increments, which sometimes can be wasteful because we're doing more often than not an 18:1 volume ratio. And so that was easier to measure that way, but it's wasteful. I still do my mixing in these. Basically, I put it on the scale, I do my mix of ratio, I'll throw a plastic nitrile glove on the top, and then shake it as per instruction that way, so the nitrile glove acts as my my cover, so it doesn't get everywhere while I'm shaking. And then obviously, please take this stuff seriously. There's chemicals in here you don't want to mess with. So I always have gloves on. I always have a organic vapor cartridge respirator on, and I always have glasses on just in case anything decides it wants to splash back at my face. So PPE, man, use it. Here is my ubiquitous Harbor Freight Sandblast cabinet. There are a ton of instructionals online on how to make these things work a lot better than they do out of box. I'm going to talk through the couple that I did that seemed to make a difference. I did not do all of the recommended ones, just the ones that appealed to me. First and foremost, I did run some LED lights on the inside. This one does not come with lights, and so you really had to put something in there else you were not able to see. You can also see that I did silicone seal all of the cracks and edges and surfaces where they meet. I didn't want sand blown everywhere. It's also worth noting while we're in here that Cerakote recommends you use aluminum oxide. That stuff is expensive, like really expensive. If you have a Granger nearby, they have red garnet in similar grits. Just get that, it's way cheaper. You buy it in bulk, but like I said, if you're gonna be using this for a couple projects, it's not really actually bulk in the end. I did also set up a better feeding device for this gun. I'm going to show you what it looks like underneath. It's just a couple parts from the hardware store, but the little stick that they have that goes down into the sand is absolutely useless. It doesn't pick up anything almost. So this was a real lifesaver, this mod. All right, here's what the system looks like underneath. So we've got stuff coming out here from the where it pulls the sand, and then it branches off into just this faucet spout where I can use that to change the amount of air that it pulls into sand ratio. Basically, I'm just setting that until it pulls nicely and runs smoothly, and then I just leave it at that. I haven't touched it since I first got it where I liked it. And then it just goes off here to the side to tubing that goes directly to my blast gun. The next mod that I recommend is really hard to tell here, but this is actually 2 panes of glass. The first pane, which actually has a crack in it, I should replace it, but whatever, is the thicker pane of glass that comes with the machine. And then they give you these dinky little plastic sheets that you're supposed to stick on the inside of the pane so that the grit wears that instead of the glass. Those last about 30 seconds, so just ditch that idea right off the bat. What instead you do is you just buy the thinnest glass from Home Depot. The width is already the correct width. You just have to cut it to length with like a score it and then tap. You'll get about 3 sheets or 3 panes out of the sheet for reuse, because that you put on the inside edge. So basically you just pull these bolts off and you can access the glass. And you put the thinner sheet from Home Depot on the inside, and you put the thicker sheet on the outside. And so you basically just have a sacrificial sheet that gets blasted over time and becomes foggy, and then when you can't really see very well anymore, you just replace the inside glass only. I'm about at the point where I'm going to replace it. So this side is where my spray gun comes in, so oftentimes the grit is spraying in that direction, and so you'll actually see that this side's foggier, I guess, because it hits and bounces. And but this is about where I would think about replacing it. You'll also notice that I've got masking tape. The masking tape is on the outside surface of the sacrificial glass, so it's sandwiched between the 2 panes. The reason for that is the inside glass is not tempered. So if, God forbid, something happened, like I banged a part up against the glass hard enough, I don't know why I do that, but who knows. But if that happened and the glass broke, since it's not tempered, those are shards. So I did this masking tape job to limit the danger of glass potentially falling down onto my hands while they're inside the blast cabinet if something did go wrong. So just a safety measure that I added. Here you can see the light fixture going inside the cabinet. I just used a hole that was already there. But you can also see the first half of the last mod. So they actually tell you to have your dust collection, so your shop vac or whatever, coming out of this hole. That's wrong. Just ignore the instructions. It is completely wrong. This should be your air intake. I just 3D printed a elbow shape so that as it's intaking, it's pulling things down, because if some stuff potentially came out this way, it's really not getting out of the dust cabinet because it's got to fight kind of upwards. So not necessary, but handy. You could just use some PVC elbow as well, and just some electrical tape to thicken this up to make it fit perfectly. Here's the second half of that last mod, and it is probably the most critical mod for this system from a cost perspective. I found this design on Thingiverse. It's basically a cyclone in there, and there is a tube that once it pulls in from here, which is what connects to the blast cabinet on the back, so where the instructions say your air in should come from, is actually where you should have your out. So they've got it completely backwards, but this connects to the cabinet in the back, and there is a tube that then takes a 90-degree and goes down through here and shoots material down into a Gatorade bottle at the bottom. And then there's a cyclone that pulls things back up and takes it out here at the vacuum. So basically what it's doing is it's forcing anything heavy down into this reservoir. And the reason that that's important is, as you can see, it will send a lot of your media through the vacuum. This is all still good media. If the media is so broken down that it's no longer good, it will be light enough that it will actually get pulled out by the vac. So this would all be just wasted cost. I did not print one of these when I first started, and I was going through media like toilet paper. So this is super important. This is probably one of my favorite mods to the thing. And I know what you're saying. Hey, that's annoying. I can't 3D print this. I don't have that ability. You can actually buy micro cyclones all over the place. This was cheaper for me because I do 3D print, but nothing stops you from just buying a store-bought microcyclone that you can put between the blast cabinet and your shop vac. Although this isn't technically part of the blast cabinet, this is part of the prep and blasting process. So I have a gallon jar filled with acetone that I can drop parts into. Glass, because acetone's not going to eat through that. And this is where I do my soaks to degrease before blasting. Lastly, let's talk about compressor. So this is nothing fancy. I got this for like $100 used off Craigslist. It goes up to the PSI we need. Obviously, we'll talk about what we actually use when we do a video on spraying, but it's a 15-gallon tank. It's not optimal, I'll be honest. When I'm spraying, or sorry, when I'm spraying or when I'm sandblasting plastic or pre-anodized stuff, it's not too bad because I'm doing that at like 30, 40 PSI. I can run continuously at 30, 40 PSI with this rig. When I'm sandblasting raw aluminum or I'm removing anodization and I'm blasting at 90 PSI, it'll turn on after a couple minutes of blasting, and then once it turns on, I've got about 60 to 120 seconds left before it will actually drop below the 90 PSI that I need to be blasting at. So what I'll do is I'll just, I'll have other projects going at the same time. So I'll blast for a couple minutes, and when it turns on, I'll blast until I get to just over my 90, then I'll stop and I'll let it repressurize up to where it wants to be. And then finally, once it turns back off, I'll quit doing my side projects, I'll come back, I'll blast a little more. Yeah, it's a pain. So it takes about 3 or 4 rounds of that to blast a lower, handguards longer. And God, if you're pulling anodization off, man, it takes forever. But hey, it's $100 versus several thousand for a big one that I can run continuously at that pressure. I'll take that trade any day. And here's the final component that's really important. In my line between the compressor and my blaster, spray gun, etc., I have an oil catch there in the middle, or the blue capped thing, and then I have a moisture capture capsule, the white thing, before I go out to my quick connect for the hose that goes to my tools. moisture and oil are going to ruin the finish, and if oil gets on while you're blasting, you just undid all the work you did with your soak. So this is really important. A little trick here, again, Harbor Freight special. After it goes from blue to pink, that means it is fully saturated with moisture. So usually people throw these out. I just took this apart. There's a gold disc at the bottom on that right-hand side of it. I just drilled that out until it broke, and that allowed me to basically use this as a refill. I bought some just silica beads, and I can refill that at leisure, which is a nice cost saver. And then down here at the bottom, I do have a bleed so that if any moisture gets into the system, it goes down this pipe and out the bottom. And obviously that's closed while I'm running it, so I just open it at the end of every use. Hopefully this was helpful. In the near future, we will actually walk through using this stuff to spray some projects, and you'll be able to see that you can indeed get quality results out of this. This is perfectly capable of doing the solid colors, metallic colors. We can use stencils to do camo patterns, logos. We can do battle worn here. This is perfectly feasible with this setup.